So this morning, I want to begin with some Ernest Holmes. And so I have a quote for us today. Ernest Holmes says, I am guided by the same intelligence and inspired by the same imagination which scatters the moonbeams across the waves and holds the forces of nature in its grasp. Yes, 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 Ernest. And I think that understanding that we are not separate from nature, that understanding is where we are headed this month. And there is a term for this understanding. There's a term that we're going to be exploring together, and it is ecological consciousness. I am reading a book, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking to y'all about this month comes from this book called Developing Ecological Consciousness by Christopher Uhl, UHL, if you go to look it up. This book is absolutely incredible. My mind is blown every single time I turn the page. And so first, before we begin, we have to define what ecological consciousness is. Now, there's ecological awareness, and there's also ecological consciousness. So awareness, I think, is something that a lot of us have a pretty good grasp on. It's the way that we're taught in schools, the three R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, this sort of understanding of ecology and the earth and the cycles. And we learn about the water cycle, right? And we learn about animals, and we study different biospheres and different ecological areas. And I can tell you some of the animals that live in the desert and some of the animals that live in the jungle and things like that. So this awareness of ecology. But ecological consciousness is something else. And that's where we're headed this month. And that's where I think that what Ernest was alluding to in that quote, this deeper understanding. So ecological consciousness is a way of being. It is not only about becoming better educated about our world, but it's a different way of approaching, perceiving, experiencing, and interacting with the natural world. Approaching, perceiving, experiencing, and interacting. And this book, Developing Ecological Consciousness, it really takes us there. So for this first week, we're just going to be looking at the universe and what our place in it is. So Thomas Berry says that indigenous peoples live in a universe, in a cosmological order, whereas we, the people of the industrial world, no longer live in the universe. We live in North America. We live in a political world, a nation, a business world, an economic order, a Disney dreamland, a cultural tradition. So what does that mean that we don't live in a universe? And Christopher Uhl talks about this. And what he talks about is if you don't have an awareness of your place in the natural world and of your place in the universe, can you really feel like, are you really a part of the universe? Or are you simply just going through the motions or living your day-to-day, everyday life? Well, this is the question that I've been pondering is, do I live in the universe? Am I conscious and aware of the fact that I live in the universe? And I think that often, a lot of times, the answer is no, that I'm just so busy going about my day-to-day life and getting things done, and what are the errands and what are the order that things have to be done in, and what's on my to-do list today, that I forget that I am an integral part and piece and essence of this universe. And so this idea of developing ecological consciousness is this understanding, this return to the universe as our home, not this house, not this country or this city or this community even, but the universe. The universe is our home. And so I think where I'd love to go today, because I think that this is so fascinating, I'd love to start at the beginning. I would love to start at the start of our home. And so we've all heard of the Big Bang, right? And I did a little bit of research on the Big Bang. And what's really interesting about this is that it's a misnomer that it was a bang. We have this idea that, boom, there was this massive explosion, and then everything came into existence, right? And yet, what's interesting is that when the theory of the Big Bang was being developed, one of its somebody who didn't believe in it actually called it the Big Bang as a kind of a joke, as a this is a ridiculous thing, and the name stuck because the theory stuck. But really, and the way that I prefer to look at it is it's a big bloom. And the Big Bang is still happening. We are still, as a universe, blooming into existence. Now, do you know how I know that? Back in 1964, there were two radio astronomers, Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias, and they were fiddling around with this antenna that they got their hands on. So it was antenna that was supposed to be used to transmit radio waves long distances across the planet, but it quickly became obsolete within just a few years, and it was handed over to these radio astronomers to do experiments with. Now, they needed a completely clear field to do the experiments. They needed no static, nothing. And they kept getting this static in their transmissions and could not figure out what it was. They tried everything. They pointed it at New York City to see if maybe it was the static of the city. No, it wasn't that. They cleaned the whole thing out. They even removed some pigeons that were living in the antenna itself. Nope, the static is still there. They're pointing it all over the place. They're trying to figure out, where is it coming from? And they finally realized that what they were hearing was the sound of the Big Bang. They were literally hearing the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMBs, that of the ancient light that began emanating at the beginning of the Big Bang. And so we think that the Big Bang is this thing that just happened in the past. Bang, everything's into existence, and now here we are as a universe. But that's not what's happening. Instead, we are blooming in this ever unfolding evolution of the universe. The Big Bang is still banging to this day, and we can actually hear the sounds that is being emitted from the original big bloom, Big Bang, whatever you want to call it, the beginning of this universe. How cool is that? And so at the beginning, at whatever the start was, the initial bloom, the initial bang, whatever you want to call it, that the only thing that existed were elementary particles like Higgs boson, quarks, leptons, all of that. And then they morphed into protons and neutrons, which immediately began bonding into stable relationships. So in that one instant of the creation of the universe, what happened was that these quarks, these tiny elementary particles, immediately bonded together into protons and neutrons, and all of a sudden we had hydrogen. And the hydrogen, all of the hydrogen in the entire universe today, right now, was also there, already existing at the beginning of the universe. The very hydrogen that is in our bodies, the hydrogen that is at the the start of in every glass of water that we drink is the same hydrogen that existed at the start of the universe. And so, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I showed you some pictures of galaxies from the new James Webb Telescope. And I said, these are your baby pictures. I meant that literally, that in looking at these stars, looking into the past, which is what these telescopes do, they are showing us light from billions of years ago, that we are literally looking at the stars that died and created the complex atoms and molecules of carbon and hydrogen and all of that that eventually became us, that we are literally stardust. And not only are we stardust, but everything else is stardust as well. And we like to think that there's nature and right there's the natural world, and then there's the not the unnatural world. But the reality is that it's all the natural world, that everything that is in existence today, whether it is the ring light that is shining down on me, or the squirrels that play out in my yard, that we are all existing from these atoms and molecules that were birthed from the dying of stars, that all of us have within our very being the hydrogen that existed at the beginning of time. And so when we talk about this idea of ecological consciousness, it's becoming aware of our roots and being so deeply embedded in them that then we look out into the world, we have a different viewpoint, that we're no longer looking out at nature or the universe, but we are looking with the eyes of the universe. We are truly the universe looking at and observing itself. The universe as humanity, the universe as one another, the universe as the grass, the universe as the sun, the universe as the technology. That all of these things are expressing this experience of being a universe. How cool is that? And so, what we know and what we can look at when we look at this universe is that the whole entire thing is rooted in relationship. That even at the very beginning, when everything bloomed into existence and those elementary particles were just there, that immediately they started bonding together and pairing together and becoming these stable relationships. That hydrogen is one proton and one neutron, the most basic fundamental element that makes up this entire universe, that makes up all of us, is in itself a relationship. And that, it sounds cool, it's pretty, it's poetic. But it's actually, when we really get down to it, it is mind-blowing. In this book, in developing ecological consciousness, Christopher Ohl poses some questions about the creator that would create a universe that is founded in relationship, with relationship at the heart and the core of everything that happens. And now you don't have to believe in a God out in the sky. In fact, Christopher Ohl says that what we can know from looking at the universe is that God is not a being. It is an action or a process. And isn't that what we teach in Science of Mind? That God, that in this idea of oneness, when we speak about God, when we use these terms like God and spirit and things like that, that what we are really alluding to is the ever evolving action and process of the universe and the multiverse expanding and knowing itself as us, in us, and through us, that we are the individualized expression of that action, of that process. And so if we look at God as process, and then we look at God as creator, what Christopher Ull asks is, what kind of creator would place coupling and relationship at the center of the universe? What kind of creator would design a universe that is wondrous and mysterious beyond our wildest imaginings, that is, to our eyes, both imperceptibly large and imperceptibly small, all in the same moment, in the same breath? What kind of creator would fashion a universe where destruction leads to rebirth and transformation? What kind of creator would manifest a universe that is not fixed or static, but dynamic in a constant and active process of moving towards more complexity, greater diversity, and more intimacy? What kind of creator would do that? And what we can know when we ask these questions is that this creator is not a being, but instead a process in and of itself. And we can look at these questions and we can say, this creator, this process is playful, it is generative, it is loving, it is creative, it is spontaneous, it is whimsical, it is wise, it is benevolent. It is good. All of these words and ideas that we place and that we say are God are, in fact, the universe. It is nature as this process, as this God stuff, as this creator that is showing up as itself ever and forever in process and action. And so if it's all one, then we are also that. We are also this process. We are also this unfolding, this action. And so is the universe. The universe is not a thing. The universe is not a place. It is a process of becoming, a dazzling unfolding. We are processes of becoming, living in a process of becoming that was created by a process of becoming. In this beautiful fractal experience of understanding that the microcosm, the smallest, mirrors the image of the macrocosm, the largest. That we are the unfolding that is mirroring the unfolding of the entire universe, that is mirroring the unfolding of the multiverse, that is mirroring the unfolding of whatever it is that is beyond that. Yes. And so if we go back to this idea of relationship, if we go back to this idea of this universe is founded on the understanding the very need for relationship, then let's look at our relationship to the sun just for a minute. Now, the sun has been sunning, it's been burning for almost 5 billion years. And scientists say that we are about halfway through its lifespan. So it has about 5 billion more years, 5 billion more years of burning before its lifespan is complete and it dies and blooms into all of those ever unfolding particles and molecules, so that in 5 billion years, those beings, whatever the universe looks like then, will be made from the star stuff of our sun. So the sun is about 5 billion years old. And what is it, the heat and the energy and the light that it gives off is from this process of protons smashing together and protons forming and joining, right? And so in this process, in this explosion at the center of the sun, about 1% of the mass of the protons is lost to heat and light and energy. And every second, 8 billion pounds of proton mass is lost by the sun. 8 billion pounds every single second. Every second. And it explodes outward in all directions, right? And on its journey out, one of the places that it hits is the earth. And so the amount of all of that 8 billion pounds of mass that reaches the earth is 5 pounds. Every single second, 5 pounds of the sun's mass reaches the earth. And in that heat, in that light, in that energy is how there is life. The sun continually and forever giving to the earth in this beautiful and divine relationship. The earth would not exist without the sun, and the sun is not complete without the earth. And every single second, the sun gives 5 pounds of itself to this planet. Now, 5 pounds, you might be thinking, that's not a whole lot for this entire planet. However, when you do all of the equations with A equals mc squared, what we know is that the amount that reaches the earth in 1 hour from the sun is more than we use in fossil fuels in an entire year. That is the energy of the sun. And so if we look at this relationship, what we know and what Christopher Ull says is a forerunner of human generosity is stellar generosity. Now, one of the things that Reverend Barbara Waterhouse used to say all the time, and that I believe so wholly and so deeply, is you cannot outgive the universe. That we can be wildly generous with ourselves, wildly generous with our time and our talents and our treasures and all of it, because we cannot outgive the universe. And that is proof in the stellar generosity of our sun that every single second is giving 5 pounds of itself to us so that we can live, we can exist, we can be. And so, as we explore this idea of ecological consciousness, the first thing that we get to do is move our mindset out from being in a city or a state or a nation or these political divided lines, or even in a business or a house, and think outside and grow and expand our consciousness to understand that we truly are nature. Happening, experiencing, processing, acting in every second, every word, every breath, every thought. And so I'm going to ask you a question now, and I want you to think about the answer over this coming week. We're going to do a tell us next week when I'm back in the center. And I have 2 questions for you. The first question is, when I ask you, where is the universe? Where do you immediately want to point? Do you want to point out there, up into the sky, somewhere else, the universe out there? Or do you want to point at the universe as the earth, maybe pointing down? Or do you point at yourself, knowing that the universe is each and every one of us? Now, all of these answers are right and incomplete, that it includes all of these things, right? But just notice where your mind automatically goes. Does it go to yourself first, or does it want to point away from yourself to some other place out there, rather than having this inherent deep connection to the earth, and this deep inherent connection to the universe? And then my question that I'm going to ask next week is, what is your relationship to nature? So now, understanding and knowing this deep connection, this process of the universe as ourselves, what is your relationship to the universe as nature? So think about it this week. Just begin to notice. Notice how much you do notice or don't notice the nature around you. And next week, we'll be talking even more about that.